all the usual Anglican services there, functions, could be music and concerts in there as well. This is the main route between Bristol and Bath. We do, I mentioned glass, we do still make Bristol glass in a factory in Bedminster, south of the river, and each item is still individually blown. Traditionally it's blue, and the blue comes from cobalt, but we do now make the pink as well. I don't know what colours it pink, but Bristol blue glass is quite well known. Very expensive because each item, as I said, is individually blown. So we're entering the parish of Redcliffe, where originally the glass used to be made, and they made it from this good sand that was in the cliffs at one time here. The church now is the main feature in Redcliffe. This pub opposite is called the Reckless Engineer, after his mum, Clifton College, because he was regarded as quite reckless with the trying to St Mary Redcliffe Church ahead of us. One of the interesting features in that church is the tomb of William Penn. He was the man whose son set up Pennsylvania in the States. It was done because King Charles I gave some money to William Penn, the senior, because he was supported him. He was a royalist, was William Penn, and as a reward, King Charles I gave him a piece of land, which was behind the they often come to St Mary and have a look at the main tomb there. On the left there, you can see in front there's another gorilla. There are over 60 of them in and around the city. In the church yard at the back, there's a headstone for the church act. They gave them a Christian burial, and then they put him in the yard with his own stone. It was a great day with the family. People live down here on their boats. The buildings have been adapted for restaurants and so on. The foreign wall here was thought to take smugglers in, but in the side there's a little lookout point where they would put someone looking out for the press guns. On the lookout for likely customers to become sailors. The sailors were very unpopular, and the press guns were eventually by the government to area there. Watch out for the press guns. On the left you can see ahead of us that building. That was another place where they used to store tea, Bush House. It's now an art centre called the Arnolfini, where there's displays of art and the cinema and a nice restaurant and bar. Across the bridge there on the left, which is called Clifton Street, there's a lot of the dockside development, including the M Shed, which has recently been opened, which tells you a lot about the people of Bristol. 5 o'clock this afternoon. If you bought your ticket today, you could use it again tomorrow if you're in Bristol. Hope you've enjoyed the tour. If you want to ask me anything, I'll try and answer your question. And thanks for listening.
He's going to point some of them out, so we might see some just while we're driving around.
If it's free, have one. All right, you will.
Could I have a pen with me?
Okay, just be careful. Mummy needs that mat too.
Okay. Right, gentlemen, you sign. My name's Bill. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. Okay. Well, we've picked a really good day. It's going to be sunny all day. A couple of housekeeping notes. Please don't stand up if the bus is moving. Particularly people on the left-hand side of the bus, because we do have a trouble with trees in Bristol. They tend to hit the bus.
Okay,
So it's here when it's raining, but it's not raining today, so we should be all right. Your ticket's going to last you for 2 days. So it's on off. So if you're here tomorrow, you can certainly do all this again tomorrow. As we go around, I'll point out some of the attractions and some of the places you can get on, and some of the places you can use your vouchers. There's lots of vouchers to go. The trip's going to take us about an hour and a quarter, and we hope to see a great part of this wonderful city of ours. Okay, I suppose you can tell by my accent I am a Bristolian, so it is my city, so welcome to it. It is a lovely place to live. And the centre where we are now is in fact it's Bristol city centre. If you like history, some people do, some people don't, I happen to quite like it. All I want you to do is remember one date, which is 1240. And that's the date which we'll keep coming back to. And I'll explain why much later on in the talk. 1240 is an important area because this area, well, now crossing over, used to be the old city port of Bristol. Bristol is a seaport. We're 7.5 miles away from the sea, but the area now over on your left hand side was all dug out in 1240 to a depth of 18 feet, 40 feet wide. You went from almost from a half a mile from the medieval city, which was behind us, right the way down to the River Avon. And this was Bristol's main seaport, right up until 1976, and that's when the city port closed. Over the years, parts of it have been covered over, obviously, but up until 1922, boats used to moor exactly where we are now, as far up as they can. So as we're going to go down, we're going to see an area of Bristol as a seaport. The city itself, in fact, has gone over a major renovation, and the fountains over on the left-hand side, that was done in the millennium, the year 2000. So as we come down, you can see the buildings over to your left are some old warehouses. Lots of goods, gorillas again, I will explain about the gorillas as we go round, but we're going to point those out. The warehouses here took in tea and coffee, iron ore and wool. A very, very busy port. But an unusual port in the fact that it being 7.5 miles inland, it was also up into the 1800s tidal. And the difference between high tide and low tide was something like 40 feet. And I'll explain that as we go further on. After 76, when all this closed down, regeneration started here in the 80s. And now this is very much a very fashionable place to live. They've changed the name, it's no longer Dockside, it's now called Harbourside. And in fact, if you add our Harbourside to your address, you can add an extra £20,000 to the bill. Okay, that's our new aquarium. This is a wonderful place. If you've got young children, if you ever come to Bristol when it rains, take them there. It's a hands-on science park. It's an all-day attraction, brilliant for kids. Very much hands-on. They like science, that's the way to go. Over to your right, you can just make out the twin towers of our 11th century cathedral. So as you can see, lots of new developments taking place all the way down here. £300 million actually being spent down here. There's a gorilla there. Quickly about the gorillas. Bristol Zoological Gardens is 175 years old this year. They have painted or have made these gorillas based on the old gorilla called Samson, who used to be in the zoo. And he, in fact, is all over the city. They've been painted, and in September they're all going to be sold off to various charities. One of the charities is going to be the Gorilla Trust at the zoo, and the other one is going to be the Bristol Children's Hospital. So that's the gorillas. This building's here, coming on your left-hand side, Old City Gas Works. This is where They used to burn well oil because it burned a much brighter light. Okay, that's the last part of the redevelopment of Bristol. That's the last part of the docks that need to be redeveloped. As we go across, we're going to look across to your left-hand side. We're going to look at some boats. Usually there's two, and I always get the jersey here because the other one's not in, so there we are. We're going to look at one. Usually there's another boat there, part moored there. We'll talk about that in a second. But the boat we're looking at there is the SS Great Britain. It was Brunel's second great ship that he built in Bristol. Launched from that site in 1843, and that's it's made and held now. It's the world's first iron-hulled, screw-driven ship. As you can see, looking at her now, she's presented as she looked on the day that she was launched. Now this is a ship, in fact, that went 32 times to Australia. She made 9 years of crossing the Atlantic to America. She was built for the transatlantic America trade. The reason she's got sails, because someone's going to say in America she's got sails, is they were never very sure about the steam. And they thought, well, rather than her break down, and of course they had sailing ships across the Atlantic all the time, but when they had steam, they thought, well, just in case this breaks down, we don't want to be looking idiots. So they put sails on her. But in fact, she never ever used them. They were used at a much later date. When she was sold to the Australian room, they took down 2 of the masts, and she became a 3-masted schooner with a smaller sail. But she operated, let's say, 32 times to Australia. She took the first English test team to Australia. W.D. Grace's brother sailed on that ship. And if you went on that ship, you could get milk and eggs because she carried a small menagerie of animals. So we're now looking at the harbour. As you can see, the height of this harbour is maintained artificially. And as we said, up until the 1800s, the distance between the high tide and low tide was over 40 feet. So boats that were built in Bristol had to be very, very sturdy. And in fact, they were very narrow, very small boats, very wide bottom boats. And the expression ship shape of Bristol fashion comes from those days, because they had to be very sturdy, because when the tide went out, they obviously sunk on the mud. We'll see all this as we go round. But in the 1800s, a gentleman called Mr. Jessup came down from London. He just finished the East India Dock in London. And he looked at some maps and some plans and decided to do something about the harbour. And he did this by creating a series of locks and garages and chains of water to block up the harbour. And the first thing he did was build a 4-acre hole. He dug out a hole, in fact. They're always digging out of Bristol, but this one was quite major. 4 acres. So coming up on the right-hand side. If you look further to the right the way down, it's now called Cumberland Basin, you can see the main lock gates which protect the harbour. So there's the 4-acre hole, which he dug. There's the main lock gates right down over to the right-hand side. It created the floating harbour over on the left-hand side. It created an extra 80 acres of water. Well, that's fine, but that used to be the old course of the River Avon. So what do you do with the River Avon? It's still flowing. So he had an idea for this, and that's what we're going to look at this second. These houses coming up on your left-hand side. Look on the lintel, there's a number. See, there's a number on the lintel? There's also a number on the door. And that used to be the dockers' cottages. So the workers at the docks used to have their dock's number on the lintel and their house number on the door. So that's the cottages. So here's the solution to the River Avon. What do you do with it? You divert it. So the River Avon now is flowing over on your right-hand side. This is man-made. This was dug out in between 1800 and 1809. That's the new course of the River Avon. That's the old course of the River Avon. So you have water on both sides. You have water on your left, water on your right, and at the top, about 2.5 miles further up this river, there was a lock gate which joins the two together. So we're on an island. We have water all the way around us. The River Avon itself rejoins its original course at the back of Temple railway station, our main railway station. But this took 9 years to dig out, and we should talk about this again as we come and see it at a slightly different angle. But the River Avon is now in its new course. Up until 1930, the boats used to moor on full tide. They could moor on that side. You can see some evidence over there of a quay side. And then they would rejoin the floating harbour further up at the top lock gate. It creates an island which looks from the very top like a marlin spot. So here we are, we're at the SS Great Britain. We're coming up to our stop for the SS Great Britain.
America. Now, a delight for you people in Bristol, because they always used to say it but couldn't prove it. Within the last 10 years, it's been totally proven by Spanish records, which are now fully open for everybody to view, that America was named after Bristol's customs officer, Vespuccio Americo. And he named America, and it's stuck. So that's quite an important claim to start with. Well, a bit bumpy around these bends, and say this warehouse is going to be rebuilt. Wallace used to be in this one, but they moved to their new building. When we see the first window, you'll see Gromit, and the second window's got the Penguin with a railway engine. He used to be in that one, you see. Right, here we are on the left. It's the first window's got Gromit. Wallace is way inside on a settee. And the second window's got the Penguin with a railway engine. I'm not so aware of the Penguin, actually. I'm aware of Lady Tockington, her of the big nose and the big mouth and big ears. She's got on an exotic holiday vacation, by the way, to be followed by a week in Severn Beach. So she's not around at the moment, Lady Tockington. Welcome to those who've just joined. I shall be around. You won't get away with it. I've asked where everybody else comes from, and it'll be your turn in a minute. I'm a nosy person. But welcome for now. It's Ian driving out Derek. Now, it's sad. This is the last week of Casualty being in Bristol. They've upped and finally gone because of the BBC. But another series is still filmed here, although they don't make so many now. That block of flats, a similar block near Bristol City's ground, regularly renamed Nelson Mandela Towers. Only Fools and Horses was all Bristol. So Peckham was actually Bedminster. And when they were Batman and Robin, that was the old C&A in Broadmead, where today Cabot Circus is. When they ran through the street in front of the shops. Little ships came up here to 1900, so the bridge behind us did actually used to swing until the early 1900s. Here's this caravan site again, very, very popular, that one. Look up right at the first ground view of some of our grandest Crescent. The one at the top's the longest in the world. It's quite a bit longer than Bass Road Crescent. Bass did come first and was finished in Georgian times. Because of the crash of money and building development in the Boreal Wars, lots of terraces in Bristol, in Cheltenham, in Brighton, etc. were left derelict. Royal Crescent was left derelict for 20 years. That middle part nearly became a barracks. But they didn't defeat that. So, unlike Bass Road Crescent, which is pure Georgian and classical, this up here is Georgian shells, but when it was finished, it was more like what we call Regency, with balconies and verandas. And I'm sure you know Cheltenham, I'm sure quite a few who've been to Brighton, what we call the Regency style. And then Paragon, and then the bridge. Now, we can't go down the gorge because the cliffs have been given away. But we do have a good view here down the gorge, and we see it again from the downs, isn't it? Now, these bonded warehouses were originally for tea, tobacco and wine. The warehouse behind us had lots of wines only 4 years ago. This is Bristol's Record and Archive Office and our Create Centre, which is where you can learn to have solar power and everything else in your house. Now, this is the end of the locked-in harbour. It was just now fairly high tide, and that's when the gorge is at its best. But Bristol people will tell you it goes down to a trickle at low tide. You'd barely get your rubber duck up the gorge at low tide. And you all brought your rubber ducks to experiment, didn't you? But it's going down already. It was high tide, it's already starting to go down, but it's barely in, and that's our pretty set. Anybody wanting to take a photograph, we're going to completely swing around now, so get ready. It's a mini wine gorge. We have to have Germans on to know exactly what I mean. There are Swiss chalets, vineyards and castles down the gorge. Walk down the treed side, get the regular boat trip. So here it is, look, straight down, it's 7 miles away. You come out at the sea at Portishead and Avonmouth. Worse spots than that in a city, you know. I think well, I do. I've been here 35 years. You never cease to wonder at it. It's the most beautiful spot to have, and as an approach to the harbour of the city. Here's where we still come in. This 1873 lock. They've just had very expensive new steel lock gates installed, made in Holland, replacing very worn out wooden lock gates, which were 140 years old. Hot wells began down here, later grew up the hill to Clifton. All of this would have been promenading here, where now the traffic is. All these houses, just like in Bath, were lodging houses for the season. Shame to grumble about the trees, but the square coming up is 1720s. It's a lovely script. You get out sometime and walk around it. It illustrates Bristol's architectural development, which is every style imaginable and every building material. So it's either stone or brick. It's lovely Diary Square. And then we're going back towards the city and the docks again. Now something historic happened in Diary Square. In 1808, Bristol's Pneumatic Institution was formed. There is a plaque on one of those. Humphrey Davy from Penzance and Dr. Beddoes of Cornwall started experimenting with laughing gas. Now they were a bit of a weird lot, so people thought they were weird to start with, but they'd give it to all the cows outside that would stagger around, and gave it to themselves and they'd stagger around, cooking up the hill to Clifton, because people thought they were drunk. But they were actually having inhaled laughing gas, beginning the experiments with that, and led on to anaesthetic. And of course Humphrey Davy went on to become head of the Royal Society and invented the miners' safety lamp. And anybody knows Penzance, there's a statue of Humphrey Davy at the top of the main street in Penzance. Well, on the right we got that green gorilla again. On the right used to be Charles Hill, a very ancient shipwreck. There's a rowing regatta on today, by the way. Look at all the people over there watching. We often have rowing regattas now in Bristol. There used to be this big dockyard replaced by this shipyard. Now something very historic is happening in that dry dock over there at the very back. I'll have to tell you in a minute. It's only at the hull stage at the moment. Matthew is normally over there. Apparently it's gone up the harbour to the Great Britain, to the Arnold. If you see because it'll still have it when it's back here on other days, look for the gorilla on the prow of the Matthew. That's very fine. Now what's happening in that dry dock? Well, because we've still got the skills, it's a national project. It's rebuilding again what would be the largest passenger pedal wheel steamer, much bigger than the Waverley. It's the Medway Queen, that will again be based at Rochester and sail from London to Medway and down to Margate, and it will probably tour as well. And that's been rebuilt in that dock back in the Albion dockyard. Now this is where a river comes under the road. It's Jacob's Wells Road. So you're going to have water, you're going to have Jewish things. We had a big Jewish quarter here in the 10 to 1200s. Behind here, this red sandstone building, is the oldest Jewish ritual bath in the whole of Europe, dated 1050. And they're going to have it on view to the public before long, and they're just about to start rebottling Jacob's Wells water in old bottles as well. Now we had a Jewish cemetery on the right to the mid-19th century when it was relocated, and then the relocated Queen Elizabeth's Hospital was built in Tudor style. That's one of our 8 public schools. We've got more than any other city in Britain. It's a blue coat school, and it's the only one of all the schools that isn't co-educational. It's still only for boys. It's founded by Mr. Carr, a soap boiler, in 1590. Now if we look right, because we come to Clifton this way until next season, an early view of the University Tower, that's the best secular 20th century Gothic tower. The slightly later and other best one is Liverpool's Anglican Cathedral, finished during the Second World War. Now this is one of our best shopping areas, Queen's Road, Park Street, by the way. Got lots of separating everything in Bristol, not least the shops. But we come through here in a minute. Round the corner is one of our big assembly rooms. One survives in the Mall in Clifton. This is the last to be built and the biggest. It's like a Greek temple. Been for many years the university's music department. It really marks the beginning of Clifton. And if you look here, you can go in there to enjoy a concert in term time. We have another gorilla here, this time one with a pair of sunglasses. Yeah, we see that in a minute. There's the gorilla there, look. No, we mentioned the academy coming back. Now this is Pastel. They didn't like this block in the 30s. It was higher than the norm. We weren't used to flats at that time, and we certainly weren't used to brick in Clifton. So this was nicknamed the London Edgware Roadstar. And if you come out of Paddington, you know what I mean. There's loads in the Edgware Road on that, and some in Bournemouth in the centre as well. Right, now here we come back ahead of us in a minute. Now we're on an open top bus. Even sitting, although Ian's careful, be wary of these trees up here. You might just need to bend down slightly. He normally tries to pull out quite a bit, but just be precautionary. Now, Barstow is white when it starts. I'm sure some of you have seen the new shopping centre at Bath near the railway station. Plain white. Well, we got a new rebuilt Bond house on the corner, just finished in 2011, bombed in 1940. But look at the colour, here it is on the left, pure Barstow. Look at the colour of it. That's the colour of Barstow. It only goes cream later, and if you let it, it goes black with dirt. Well, on the right, keep looking right for the minute. We've got a lovely Regency stucco terrace with balconies. Look right again at the first classical house leading into classical Canning Square. It's lovely all round here. So there's the first house, there's many more round the corner. And that's our architecture, could be up in Cheltenham, for instance. Now this is the less attractive car park rear of the modern Catholic Cathedral. Here's stained glass and stained glass here, so it's lovely inside. Not everybody likes the outside. Finished in 1973. The only other modern one is the Liverpool wigwam, of course. Altar in the middle, like at Liverpool. And that's the Bishop of Clifton's Roman Catholic diocese. There's a Regency Barstow Terrace on the left, Western Terrace. Here's the first of some of the Barstow villas, because by the mid-19th century, terraces were out, and this wasn't just Bristol, and villas were in. Ahead of us was Bristol's grand, but last terrace, Vivian Terrace. You can see how grand it is, with its railed-in private lawns. And then on the right, some of the villas. This is what we call Victorian Gothic on the right. There's many, many designs in Bristol. There's several of this style, but this is what we call Victorian Gothic. Now we come back ahead of us in a minute. We're going up Pembroke Road, College Road. We go all the way. Now we start with Barstow. This was one of the country's first 19th century high school for girls, Clifton High School. We have the country's oldest, from 1630s, out at Westbury-on-Trim, Red Maids. Down to the right is the Mews, like in London is where the carriages used to be. I love this stone, I keep mentioning it. This is the other bit of Clifton High School. This red volcanic stone, and it can be brown. All these villas, other parts of Clifton, this walling, and a portishead. And it was all quarried in the gorge and on the downs, but it was ruining those areas, so we stopped it in 1861. But unfortunately, the stone can't be found anywhere else. With Templemead Station on the right, this is the biggest building in it. This is Clifton College, one of the country's top public schools. It ranks with Harrow, Westminster and Winchester as one of the top 5 public schools. It now takes school girls. To the left there's a modern theatre down there, I often go there, called the Redgrave, because all the theatrical Redgraves grew up in Clifton. The statue is Earl Hay, because he went to school there in Victorian times, commanded our troops in the First World War, and the arch is actually a First World War memorial. And coming up, the road divides the college from the zoo. The zoo is the reason for the gorillas. We've got 2 at the zoo, so this is the first one at the rear. This was only the 2nd oldest zoo in the world, 7 years younger than London. Then, shortly we got now by far the biggest in Europe again, Berlin's zoo, then Dublin and Vienna, and they're the 5 oldest zoos in the world. London, Bristol, Berlin, Dublin and Vienna. And we were the first in a non-capital. You can get married in a zoo. It's a lovely botanical gardens. Of course, they are going to build this massive out-of-town conservation park as well the next few years. We have a stop here, and then when we pull ahead, there'll be another gorilla and the frieze of animals over the entrance. Anybody want the zoo? No, nobody seems to here. But as we pull ahead, Down's already coming ahead of us. Look right at the other gorilla and the frieze of animals over the entrance. Now the zoo's been there since 1835, these houses since the 1850s. I remember I said the Downs and the Gorge was being quarried for that stone. It's also been mined for lead. They were fearful that all the Downs would disappear, and the Gorge. We go down the promenade in a minute, by the way, and this is where we normally come up with the Gorge. Right, we're already on the Downs, so they wanted to save it. They now rank the acquiring of the Downs to New York and Central Park. To acquire such a massive, beautiful area so near a big city was totally ahead of its time in 1860. So there was an Act of Parliament, 1861, the Downs Act. It's preserved forever. There are very strict instructions of how to behave up here. It's saved forever. It's run by the Merchant Venturers and the Downs Committee of the Council. This is not a Bristol Park up here. It's something special. We've got lots to talk about. We're way within Bristol, by the way, except the gorge parts. Now here we had lots of poets, painters and writers in the Romantic age, clambering on the cliffs. We had Wordsworth here a lot. They painted all the gorge and of course the ships. Some famous painters that were from Bristol. We get lots of bird watchers on this corner for looking at the peregrine falcons and ospreys. All the trees on the other side of National Trust. There are vineyards underneath. See how lovely the river is. Take the boat trips, walk it. There's the Bristol Channel with our port, and that is Newport and South Wales on the other side. Now we can't stop on that corner, but you can walk back here, and we see a bit more of it when we get to the other end of the downs. So as I say, don't stand yet, please. That's not allowed on the downs for a start. They'll be told off. You'll have the wardens after. You're not allowed to erect tents up here. Now we have a little soiree. Do call across that you could do with a cucumber sandwich. Hello? Can we have a cucumber sandwich, please? Hello? Oh, aren't they mean? Never threw us a bottle of lemonade or anything. Right, now this is planted with quite a lot of trees. Round the corner, you'll see it's completely different. It's all open and spacious. But just take on board, this isn't just as nature would have it. Up here, it's planned natural. We hope nature will go along with what we want, but we say, oh, there's another little gathering on the left. Hello. By the way, just now, we don't always see him, but he knows the kite by heart. Here's a kite, look. Sometimes, you know, there's none, there's quite a few, there's a kite. There's another kite on the right, there's two. 1 and 3, and of course early September, famous kite festival, 8 kites in Bristol. We've already had our balloons here. Now anywhere along here, it is safe to stand, there are any trees, but we're moving, so hang on. Right, to the left we've got the bridge, finished in 1864, and lit up at night. Bristol founded round the top in Saxon times to avoid the Vikings. Look at the A4, the first trunk road built in Britain in the 1920s. The river's at its best because it's fairly well in. There's the woods over there. There's our port at Portishead Dock. We had a huge liner between those cranes only a fortnight ago, bringing in 800 passengers. Portishead to there. And that white building on the other side of the water is Newport Docks and the Black Mountains. So there it is, back behind you. The gorge. We often get rock climbers coming out over it. We're not yet at the bus stop. I'll turn around a minute and see if any of you want to get out. There's boards here telling you about the ancient animals and vegetation. Founded after the last ice age. And there's a lovely view looking back up, and there is a stopping. Anybody want to leave us? If you do, it's a minimum half an hour. Anybody? Right, there's a vineyard under here. Oh right, okay, there is some coming down. There's a house like a castle, one here with a tower. Now they were built, yes, by people who had money, but they were originally also ship owners. So this black and white one was a shipper of port and sherry. Bye-bye then, and we're every half an hour. Now, by the way, sorry, not the downs, the gorge is its own ecozone, so there are many rare plants in the gorge. They're still coming down here that aren't found anywhere else. We have 12 Bristol rock roses, a Bristol onion, and several others. Anyway, if you come back every half an hour, I hope you enjoy the nice weather. You always get a bit of breeze up here. Yeah. We've got all sorts of gatherings. We've got a kite right there. There's quite a few in the distance. We've got another little gathering on the left. Perhaps they'll throw us a few cucumber sandwiches. It's actually looking fairly full this afternoon because of course we've had some miserable weather and sometimes it can look quite empty. Quite a few up here this afternoon. Hello! Hello over there. Can we have a cucumber sandwich, please? Come along. Look at them, I think they're planning world revolution, this lot here on the left. Right, on the left we have a lot of grand Victorian houses behind those trees, but you can't really see them. Coming up, they're so wealthy in Sneyd Park, they have roofs on their houses and actually eat their food off plates and drink their tea out of cups and saucers. They're thinking about it down in Bristol, but they haven't got round to it yet. Look at these. A lot of these are listed, by the way, because they're so fanciful. And they all had their servants. And by the way, the stone here in the long next is now Mendip stone from the Cheddar area. There's a big kite on our right, look. There's a big colourful one. Now, I mentioned earlier we had Roman connections. You won't see it, and you'll have to take my word for it. But not this road. The next road is Julian Road. That led to our Roman port, which today is Sea Mills Harbour. And if you catch the Severn Beach railway line, you stop right over the top. And in the portway, you pass Roman villas with their foundations in an exhibited monument on the side. So this led to a Bonai, and we're on all the Roman maps. To the left led to our port. There's a Julian Road in Bath. Anything Julian has Roman connections. And the path on the right is the line of the road that came from Bath to a Bonai. So we had Roman connections. If you go down in the new M Shed, you will read all about that. There's a huge Roman tombstone in M Shed, which came from the site down there. And there was a huge Roman villa, for instance, at King's Weston and at Lawrence Weston as well, which have been discovered over the years. Now on the left we have a nice grand house that replaced one of the many Georgian villas. It's 1904. The man was heavily into Wardian branch lines. It was his idea of a fanciful Wardian railway station. If you look back, it's called the Old Halt, but railway trains that never came anywhere near. But don't take this seriously, because I'm a train lover. Railway trains don't come near existing railway stations, do they? But that isn't meant to be taken seriously. But no, that is meant to be a fanciful railway. Now this is the end, I'm afraid. Sad you weren't expecting it to end so quickly, were you? Well, it's not the end of the tour, but it is the end of Clifton Downs here. That's the end of it all. Over there, it's actually Durham Downs. So Bristol people normally say they're coming up on the Downs. They don't go through all that rigmarole. There's nice housing 2 to 3 miles down to the left to Stoke Bishop and everywhere. The housing over here blends nicely in with one of our best tree avenues. Bit of Oxford further down, and Oxford College, halls of residence, cloisters, all built in Oxfordshire stone by the Wills people in 1929. And it was only the second after Reading that let ladies in 1929. So this is Durham Downs, all covered with footballers in the winter, with their own league, founded in 1904, the Downs League. And in fact there are up to 38 teams based on the Down. Another big kite over on our right. There is a stop here if anybody wants to tea with us. We've actually got some gold posts up today. Must be a Sunday playing tea. Anybody want to stop? No, there is a nice tea room here for most of the year. White Ladies Road straight on. We're turning down Ladies Mile, which is a Victorian carriage and promenading road. But once we get on it and you've taken notice of it, put it to one side, because the path again, in a minute, left and right, is that Roman road line again. Bath to the left, Bonai to the right, and just here where the path crosses, you'd have had Roman soldiers crossing 2,000 years ago from Bath on the way to the port. Right, look around. I'll come off mic for a couple of minutes. We're going northwest towards Clifton. This is still Clifton, it's a good looking area. Please don't park anywhere on the Downs except on the road where it's allowed, official place. I'm mentioning that because please don't take notice of what's at the bottom here. That's a specially allowed car park on the grass in August only and at bank holidays down here, and it's the overflow for the zoo. And they get permission. So I'll let you look around. Please again don't stand and keep vigilant. I think the tree's alright, but just make sure. Don't sort of forget where you are. You're on an open bus. Anyway, I'll talk to you in a minute, and as I say, all these cars on the left are parked here solely because it's August for the zoo. It has been very busy this week, so they've obviously been doing well. Remember, we had lots of babies born this year, not least for 2 lion cubs. grass that's been cut recently around the downs is, by the way, all given to the zoo for the animals. Now, coming down to here where we were, left of the zoo, right is the lovely bridge. Right? You people in Bristol probably have read that they hope by October that it will reopen again. It's been over 2 years since the road's been opened. But so by next season, hopefully we can come up there, because it's lovely up the bridge in the gorge and up this road. To the right is our promenade. Now, I'm not knocking Bath. Bath's promenade is quite small compared with ours, leading up to Royal Crescent. Look how spacious it is under those trees, where they all used to dress up in their Georgian and Victorian regalia. The carriages went down the road where we're also going. Look first at these massive 1850s villas in either Mendip Stone or Barstone. They're absolutely massive. Huge down here, but I'm afraid I am going to have to tell you where the money came from. First of all, the first house with a conservatory and a flag is the Lord Mayor's Mansion House, where he's based for his year of office. You'll probably have an audience with him up here. Only Plymouth, my home city, with the Astor House on the Hoe, and York equally have mansion houses in England. Everywhere else doesn't. This is the Merchant Ventures Hall. Look at these massive 1820s palaces. There's more in behind the scene, and they are definitely originally one household houses, and we do know now the money came from the slave trade. Now our driver loves this gorilla. On the right here, this bright orange one. He absolutely loves this one. Now if you go on that path to the right, you come to the gorge with a view of the whole gorge, but the only spot where you look down on the bridge. And behind you on the right is one of the Iron Age encampments, two others the other side of the gorge, so they looked out for invaders pre-Roman times. This is coming to the heart of Clifton when it was a resort, later a top residential area. It was a very top resort with lots of famous people, including royalty, staying here. And you don't hear much about it because it's Bristol. In Bath they would scream about it. Who knows that Jane Austen lived in Clifton for a year and loved it? And it's known she detested Bath. But Bristol just keeps quiet about it. She lived in Royal York Crescent for a year and loved it. Anyway, there's the Mall, all part of lovely Clifton Village. The houses down over are lovely. Carol Waterman lived in one until about a year ago. She's now outside Bristol. They're a bit like Brighton because they're both fronted. On the left we have Barstow Regency. This church is definitely meant to be a mini Salisbury Cathedral, Christ Church, and the top of the spire is the highest spot in Bristol. But if you want the ground level, it's out my way, it's Cushion Hospital. Right, we got Barstone Villas. You could spend hours up here. We're coming to the stop for Clifton. To the right, the little streets tucked in behind, including paved cobbled Waterloo Street, Barstone type terrace. There's a lovely arcade behind you on the left, 1820s with little shops. The stops here, second right, don't miss the Royal York Crescent, and then first right, Princess Victoria Street, leads into the Mall and Clifton and the shops, and later down to the bridge. So anybody want Clifton and also, yes, some do here, and also the bridge. It's every half an hour, so you've got to come back to it. If you get lost, ask people where's Smith's. Bye-bye then. Bye.
Bye.
You've got to come back to here when you get the bus again. Bye-bye. Cheerio. Bye. Look out for the names that give away its history. Princess Victoria, she stayed here for a year with the Duke of Kent as a 12-year-old. She loved it. She detested Bath as well. She was insulted there. That's official. It's not me saying it. She never went to Bath as a reigning monarch. When she was passing through by train on the way to Bristol in the 1890s, she said to herself, "Pull down the blinds. I am not to see Bath and they're not to see me." She never forgave. She was told she had fat legs and ugly ankles. That's in the records. And very nasty. It's not what you'd normally do anyway. And she was supposed to be a very attractive young lady. But that's true. It's not. But she loved it in Clifton with the Duke of Kent. So Princess Victoria Street leads down to the Mall. All the rest of Clifton. Round the corner to the right is Royal York Crescent. Half as long again as Bath's Royal Crescent. It's not being nasty to Bath, but it's fact. But Bristol, I've been here enough years, I scream to the rooftops about Bristol, but Bristol, it irritates me beyond measure. Speak up for Bristol, because so many don't. They're so Bath's nice. But also we've got more than Bath's got. They're so, I don't know, banked down, I call it. But I can show you, you've got a hell of a lot. Right, we've just gone through some backs which don't look that impressive. But we aren't meant to see the backs. This road was put through their gardens. So on the left, we've got now what's very metropolitan, the fronts, in the biggest square in Clifton. This is Victoria Square. It's only the third biggest in Bristol. Queen Square, then Portland Square, then this one. Look back now, they're all laying out today, how nice it is as a natural square. And the path across the middle is the ancient way from Bristol to Clifton. It starts Cathedral, Lower Brandon Hill, Constitution Hill section. The Regency Terrace that came before the square, like in Bath, raised pavements. You've got several streets in behind have got them as well. Remember, that was to get you off of the dirty roads. People forget, it wasn't all Vanity Fair, it was sewage even. We won't dwell on it, down the road. Mud, slurry, stinks, and it was partly to get you up above all that while they had raised pavements. The houses on the left with balconies, now we got more in Bristol, but you get some of those in Cheltenham. And equally in Cheltenham or Brighton, but not in Bath because it has stopped growing by then, what we call Regency Gothic, this chapel. Rather austere later Regency Terrace. The Students' Union on the right is one of the country's biggest, but it's got a bit dated, so apparently they're going to refront it in the next couple of years and do a lot of rebuilding inside. BBC further down, now they're at last talking about moving from Whiteladies Road to a new complex, possibly in this new enterprise area near Temple Meads in the next couple of years. But of course they do have the world famous Natural History Film Unit, and apparently you can book to do tours of it all now. On the left, I've mentioned these flats, the London Edgware Road style, but if you look at the shop, second from the end, the Barbers, that's a 1930s shop front if you look at the lettering and everything. Right, Barstow, I think some of you missed it the first time because we're going to look at the Academy as well. We got the Victoria Rooms, our best Baroque fountains, and the lovely gorilla here, this time with a pair of sunglasses. And then, so that's here with the Academy, I like this one. Then our Painting Academy, one of 4 in Britain, and the big statue is because Damien Hirst is on for nearly a year, and it's a bigger version of his 70s spastic drill statue. If you're a painter in East Anglia, Kent to Cornwall and up to the Midlands, you come under that academy. London's academy covers London only. Now this is for Queen's Road, up into San Francisco, Park Street. Nowhere else in Britain has a main topographical area so big and dramatic. And also this is the stop for the museum where Beryl Cook's on, and that's a marvellous exhibition. Does anybody want Queen's Road? No, nobody seems to. One of the branches is Patisserie Valerie on the right, another big one's in Cabot Circus. When we go ahead, up left is University Road with a lot of university buildings, and 3 grand contrasting buildings in a row, which also illustrates Bristol's architectural development. We've got the Doge's Palace Grounds Restaurant, Berkeley Square to the right, then we got the Baroque Museum with Bellecourt, and look up at the fantastic perpendicular Gothic University Tower, and when you're looking up it, give a longer look. Look at the side and front, particularly at all the gargoyles. They're fabulous expressions. Right, here's that dramatic Park Street. Just like, they hit me immediately, I lived there, it's like San Francisco, but I've never heard of Bristolian calling it there, but it's San Francisco. Jamie's Italian on the right, Café Rouge on the right where you get in there, lovely boutiques and restaurants here. Look right, all these side roads are in here, there's a Georgian terrace on its embankment. It's worth looking back at the effect of the street and University Tower at the top, beautifully lit up now at night. University Tower looks lovely at night now, all in there. Second deepest bell in Britain after Liverpool's Anglican Cathedral. Georgian House Museum up the next street right. There is a stop at the bottom for the cathedral and the ferries. Anybody want the stop at the bottom? Anybody? Right. Now by the stop we'll get an early Banksy. The boyfriend's hanging out the window to avoid the husband who's just come up, and the wife looking very anxious. Nobody wants to. So here's Banksy coming up in a minute on the left here. I don't have that much chance for the boyfriend who looks any minute he's going to slip over. When we put away one of our oldest inns to the left, look, the hatchet. A lovely Georgian area down to the left here now, Orchard Street. On the right, the Georgian side had nice flowers here as well, the Georgian style council house. Here's the cathedral, which was made a cathedral in 1542 by Henry VIII, and originally founded by Robert Fitzharding in 1140 as an Augustinian. There's the bells of the cathedral going out for their afternoon service.
The Marriott.
And eventually Robert Fitzharding became the first of the Barclays.
Doesn't it just?
Round the corner you've had all the ships in the middle, in 1937, originally right down the end. And there was a drawbridge across the middle for 150 years that had to lift up to let the little ships down the end. What reminds you of that? The pub here with the figure next to the Hippodrome, the drawbridge. The theatre is one of the biggest touring ones in Britain. The stage ranks with the London Palladium, but it's not got a big facade. But that drawbridge is because right opposite here was a drawbridge for 150 years, extended from Corn Street. Up to the left here we stop at the coastal wall, where there's another completely over-the-top coloured gorilla. I used to read The Eagle when I was young with the Green Martian Man. This is a Green Martian Man gorilla with his green face. He's every colour of the rainbow, this one, it really is. Anybody want the Colston Hall? Anybody? Right. The hall itself is still behind the columns, what we call Bristol Byzantine stuff. It's a very big new addition added on in the last couple of years. Right, we're going to start to climb up now. Bristol's hilly and it starts to climb up here, but the real hilliness would be if we went up lovely St Michael's Hill, which we don't. But we're going to see interesting things up here, and all of you on this side will need to stand in a minute. I'll give you permission to see what I'm going to point out. Right, we're famous for almshouses. These are Fosters coming up in Burgundian Gothic. The only chapel in Britain to the Three Kings of Cologne, the only one in Britain, and then Christmas steps. And unless you stand on this side, you won't see Christmas steps. So there's Foster's almshouses. It's very pretty, this grouping here. The chapel and right Christmas steps going. And note the steps going up on the left to other interesting higher areas as well. Right, look right, here's Christmas steps. Bristol's made by its hills. All along here, nice old houses with shops and cafes. Bristol's a very spread out area. If you went up to Michael's Hill, which is on the left, it really is very impressive, but also very steep. Now, not so happy because of all the gun crimes the last few years, but that is a Banksy on the right, the man with the gun. This is the very important nationally Children's Hospital, looking good. Very important nationally BRI, but I can't help but say it's just darn ugly. Our driver thinks it's a hideous one, even for the 70s. But at last there may be hope, because they're extending it in a big way at the back, and it was in the paper a few weeks ago. In the next couple of years they are seeing if they can refront the BRI with brighter panels. So it would be nice, because to me it's one of the most depressing buildings on earth. I think it's a hospital. But it is nevertheless a very important hospital. So let's hope they do refront it in the next few years. Now on the left, a much more in keeping building from 1910 for the hospital in Portlandstone, the 1910 Edward VII Memorial Park on the left here. That's quite nice. And that's quite typical of the period. Then everywhere, not just Bristol, by the 80s tried to brighten up everything and get away from concrete and look at old themes for new buildings. So on the right, Bristol's grey Victorian stone with brick rounded arch windows, and then create a modern building. And then these are pure modern, but much better. The new magistrates court's going to replace the one by St John's Arch, and it's going to be demolished. The rebuilt bus and coach station is in behind. And then we're coming to Broadmead. Now this is the outer 50s part. They've done up the Broadmead in behind, and that leads to Cabot Circus. Now Debenhams always had old names in the past. The name of Debenhams gives away one group of people that we've always had a lot of in Bristol and still do. It was called Jones. And we still have 50,000 Welsh, originally from Wales, in Bristol. And if you see a lot, I know one or two who are Welsh older ladies. They came here as servants in the 30s and then married and settled there. Unlike Liverpool, we've never had quite so many Irish. Got lots of different nationalities now. And then I remember coming up as a child, and it was still there when I moved to Bristol. Primark was the only southern branch of the Liverpool Lewis's. And the last Lewis's is finally gone now from Liverpool as well. Oh, there's the grill on the left in its nightcap. Now, not today. It seems funny because I'm going to talk about a church not being open on a Sunday. But it's John Wesley New Rooms next to Marks and Spencer's, behind John Lewis, behind Primark. But it's only on Mondays to Saturdays. It's a lovely chapel, museum, all the rooms where he lived, and wrote his sermons, there's the stable. And they have recently created a Georgian garden in front, with the statue of Wesley in part of it. So do go and enjoy it, but not today. It won't be open today. Anybody with Broadmead then? Anybody? You're all content? Have you given up on life? Are you stuck to your seats? Is it my charisma that's grabbed you? I'm sure it's not that. Right, they're all going on. And over there, look, a shortened version of Ship Shape in Bristol fashion. Have you got strong behinds? Have you got strong bottoms? Your ships did have to stand straight. You had to store your goods well in Ship Shape Bristol fashion. Now over there, look at that beautifully clean St James's Church. It's only just been finished, having had £4.5 million spent on it. There's now a cafe, an art gallery, and it's open to the public, and it's Bristol's oldest building from the 1120s with lovely Norman architecture. Now down here we've got the river, and it's at the foot of Christmas steps, under the centre. Now you know all the buildings in Nelson Street where I went through and were all painted yesterday, going to remain a lot of them. You can just see a corner of it. These courts are going to be pulled down later this year for redevelopment, but they've just done a bit of the corner of these buildings as well. But don't miss it, it's long-term in Nelson Street. This is just one end of it here. And you also crossed here from Christmas steps, and do note the city gate when you look left as well, because they crossed here from Christmas steps and into the old city. But you'll just see a bit of some of these paintings here and into Nelson Street. And all through on the side down there's the gate where you crossed, and all down there. And remember, a lot of them are staying semi-permanent. Right, some of the old cities up to the left, including Corn Street, Broad Street. At the top's the only but very fine work in Bristol by John Wood of Bath. And in front of the nails that used to be trading pillars, all up to the left there, and they used to trade on them, giving rise to the expression paying on the nail. Ships came to here, to the 1880s, so this end was Key Head. If you look at the road sign on the brick building, look, Colston Avenue, Key Head. The church for this end was St Stephen's. It's the third highest tower in the country. So look left in a minute, it's got a beautiful medieval interior, lovely garden and a cafe. So, and it's one of the existing still city parish churches for the centre. So look left and up, because it's such a high tower, here we are, St Stephen's. Now the centre is central, but not for shops, but it's become more predominant now the docks have been done up. But we go through it because it's central, but when you get down the bottom, I'll ask if anybody wants it, but do remember we've got the rest of the tour. And in a minute we're going to pass Treasure Island, which should be still on, and I'll have to come off mic. But from the top deck you get a beautiful view of the staging and everything, and they are performing this afternoon, so we'll get a good view. It was all in the paper, how good, particularly the chap who plays Long John Silver, he's fabulous. So coming up in a minute down here are the penguins in the middle, and then there's two gorillas. So anybody want this stop, but do know it's not the end. Anybody? No, okay, nobody does. And then we're going to see the restored Queen Square, and then down King Street. Then we're going to have to creep down, and I'm going to have to come off mic, which will give you all the rest as well. There's the harbour, get the ferries and walk along. Nobody getting out of here. And then Queen Square's ahead. We're only allowed to go down King Street. Yeah. We'll see in a minute, they'll open the barrier for us. It will say closed. So this is like crossing at Checkpoint Charlie in Berlin in the old days, isn't it? Down here in a minute, it says road closed, all the barriers up, and we're going to be allowed through. Yeah, no, I've been twice, it's lovely. But when you walk down, you don't see any of it. But from our bus, we'll get a trip. Now, just to remind you, there are almshouses at either end. This end, it's the Seamen's almshouses. Lovely old 1600 houses. The far end is the Landiger Trow, which in Treasure Island is meant to be Admiral Benbow, then our Jazzo Duke Club as well. But the big highlight, I'll try and cross over there because I'll get a good view as well, will be in front of the theatre. By the way, quickly, I think it's one of the best. Ahead of us is another gorilla, Blackbeard the pirate. In the middle here, look, with his big black cap on. Here we are in the middle. Blackbeard the pirate, in the middle here. Blackbeard the pirate. And remember, the first sentence of Treasure Island begins on Bristol dockside. River Avon to our right with the quayside. Old church is up ahead. Now always look up at the different tops, but also look up at the weather vanes. To the right, one of our many cockerels on St Nicholas. This is the War line. The church has actually got a bit of the war in the crypt. This is where they rang out the 9 o'clock curfew in the old days to get you inside the walls. They still ring the 10-minute 9 o'clock curfew today. Must be a recording. And up the steps is into the old city, and look up at the clock, it's got a very, very rare second hand on the bottom. And then here's where we had a mini London Bridge from the 1200s with 6-storey houses and a chapel, and the foundations of that is underneath, and the present bridge is Georgian with later windings, and it's lit up beautifully at night. Right, this gives me a time. Now I bet all of you have forgotten them. Can I have your passports, please? You mean you haven't brought them? Well, we're going abroad. Well, nearly abroad. It's 1372 and earlier. Well, semi-abroad. For 500 years, this was Bristol, Gloucestershire. That was immediately Redcliffe, Somerset over there. People forget that. And they had the deeper anchorage, and we're taking our trade away. That's why right from the beginning, St Mary Redcliffe's always been so big. We built the trench, which is in the centre, in the 1200s, and finally we took both sides over, becoming a county in 1373. But previously, if you wanted to sort out your legal things, Bristol had to go up to Gloucester, and they had to go down to Ilchester or Taunton. It was most, other than each was in rivalry. But finally, but originally from 800 to the 1300s, this was Gloucestershire, and that was immediately Somerset. Look right at all the Hanseatic part. The big barges are either German or Dutch. To the left, we had a huge castle with Castle Pride. Bits of it survived, but people forget it was as big as the Tower of London, and very, very historic. If only we'd got that left, we got to blame Cromwell. Now this is the temple part. Yes, they're modern buildings, but there's some old. This is Bristol Byzantine. On the right, we've got ancient medieval houses, but with Georgian fronts, and this time it's St Thomas's Church. Temple Church is coming up. Now Temple Church was unfortunately bombed, and it was a lovely church, but at least we had St Mary Redcliffe and the Cathedral saved. But they have restored the shell with the lovely windows. And the thing it's most famous for is the Leaning Tower. And ironically, the bombing never disturbed that. So here we are, the Leaning Tower of Temple. And it's because of the Templars that everything in this area is named after them. There's the churchyard. We can go in and see the church. Black and white Shakespeare. There is a hotel here, the Novotel. Anybody want the Novotel? That's right. Now this road was put through a densely built up area in the Victorian age. We're into the photographic age, so if you look at the old Reese Winstone books, 1860s, early 1870s, it was densely packed with housing and industry together, smoking chimneys, endless ovens producing Bristol's pottery and glass. They put Victoria Street through the middle, partly clear it out, but to link the city centre with the railway complexes. Then initially horse trams arrived. This street was heavily bombed, but they then slowly rebuilt it. Now this on the left was another one in the 80s where we looked for old themes for Bristol's new build. So it was multicoloured brick, rounded arch windows and terracotta panels, and created a modern building. It was at that time always called postmodern. So this road led to the railway complexes. Now ahead is part of our new enterprise zone, Mr. Cameron's declared. So we shan't for many years more see the side of the Brunel Great Western Railway terminus. But that's the side of the first covered terminus in the world. Still only wood, it's not yet iron. It's the widest timber span roof in the world in the shape of a hammer beam. The trains left from that Brunel shed the middle level, which was level. The sloping windows are the original drawing office where the first broad gauge locomotives and carriages were drawn up. When the building goes up here, it will of course look in towards the station. You went through the gateway here and underneath the station, got out, did your business, climbed to the first floor to leave by train. Left for London by Bath and Reading, but not yet Paddington. That was 14 years away. You left for Bishop's Bridge. Look at the mock Tudor frontage. It's mock Tudor inside. Great Western Railway is etched into the front. Eventually the tram, I love it now because I have visions of the tram still running and these people drinking coffee being bowled over. See, they can't be drinking coffee and that's in the middle of the tram lines. Well, the tram's about to arrive, isn't it? And on the right we have the just remaining offices